Hello and welcome to Indus News. Live from Islamabad, I'm Laila Shuja and these are the headlines. In Afghanistan, at least 5 people have been killed at Kabul airport as thousands of people tried to enter planes and leave. Earlier, U.S. troops fired in the air as a massive crowd mobbed the Hamid Karzai airport's runway. However, witnesses said that it was not clear whether the victims were killed by gunshots or in a stampede. This comes after the Taliban declared that the war in Afghanistan is over after they took control of the presidential palace in Kabul. Pakistan has called on the international community to support the reconstruction of Afghanistan. Meeting a high-level Afghan delegation in Islamabad, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said Pakistan wants a peaceful transition in Afghanistan. He added that a negotiated political settlement is the only way forward. Malaysia's embattled Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin has resigned but announced to continue as interim premier. Malaysia's royal palace said that the king received the Muhyiddin's resignation and the entire cabinet effective immediately. Muhyiddin said that he quit after losing the confidence of the parliament. In Haiti, the death toll from a powerful quake that struck the country on Saturday has risen to nearly 1,300, with over 5,700 injured. Authorities are struggling to bring doctors to the worst-hit areas before a major storm hits. The 7.2 magnitude earthquake flattened thousands of homes and buildings in the Caribbean nation. India has reported 417 deaths from COVID-19 and nearly 33,000 infections overnight. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 72 more people lost their lives to the virus and over 3,600 tested positive in the last 24 hours. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 4.3 million lives and infected over 207 million people so far. For more news and details, stay tuned. We'll be back after a short break. Welcome back. In Afghanistan, at least 5 people have been killed at Kabul airport as thousands of people tried to enter planes and leave. Earlier, the U.S. troops fired in the air as a massive crowd mobbed the Hamid Karzai airport's runway. Witnesses said it was not clear whether the victims were killed by gunshots or in a stampede. The tension built after all commercial flights out of the airport were canceled. Following the gunfire, the U.S. Embassy in Kabul warned American citizens against traveling to the airport. However, a Taliban spokesperson said on Twitter that the fighters were under strict orders not to harm anyone. The Taliban declared that the war in Afghanistan is over after they took control of the presidential palace in Kabul. In an interview, group spokesperson said that the Taliban do not want to live in isolation and call for peaceful international relations. Meanwhile, an Afghan military plane has crashed in Uzbekistan, leaving 2 Afghan military servicemen injured. For more on this, we are joined by Samira Khan, our correspondent in Turkham border. Now, Samira, can you please update us on the current situation at the Pak-Afghan border?
Right now, I'm here at the biggest trade crossing point between Pakistan and Afghanistan, and it is called Torkham Gate, and it is said to be the largest trade and pedestrian crossing point between these two countries. It was closed for a couple of weeks due to COVID situation, but right now, why I'm here, I am here to capture all these exclusive shots. In my background, you can see that the border crossing at on the other side of the border. I'm talking about Afghanistan, where the advanced movements of Taliban, they were in process for quite a few times. But right now, what is exclusive from this point is that this crossing point has been taken over by Taliban. The control on the other side of the border, at the side of Afghanistan, is with Taliban officially. Because earlier in the morning, the city of Jalalabad was it just fell to Taliban. It was officially handed over to Taliban, and the governor, in a simple ceremony, handed over the control of the entire Vilayat. Vilayat is said to be a province in Afghan language in Dari. It was handed over to Taliban, and now after having control of Nangarhar province, they took over Jalalabad, which is the central city of Nangarhar province. And after taking control of Jalalabad, it is hardly 25 to 30 kilometers away from this huge traded crossing point between Pakistan and Afghanistan. So these are the scenes right now. And we can officially say, now officially say that the Taliban they have posted their Islamic Emirates flag right now. It is right there in front of me on the side of Afghanistan, and it has been replaced with the official red, black, and that official flag of Afghanistan. But I'm just trying to speak to a few officials that they are representing the Islamic Emirate. The Islamic Emirate is the name to the state that has been dedicated by the Taliban for their for the structure of their government that is going to be claimed by Taliban in Afghanistan soon. So I'm just trying to speak to some of the officials right now. Let's see if they agree to speak to us. It will be another insightful discussion with them that what exactly they want in Afghanistan. And once again, the scenes are right there. And on our side, it is the border side of Pakistan gate Gorkham, and everything is quite normal here. The Pakistani officials are present right now at the gate, and they are dealing with the assigned and designated officials from the Taliban. And after the fall of Spin Boldak, the Spin Boldak, and another trade crossing point which is very eminent and prominent between Pakistan and Afghanistan, Chaman and Spin Boldak trade crossing point has also been reopened for the two-way traffic. That is, majority of the traffic is aimed to boost the trade volume between the two countries. So right here, I'm signing off from here. Sumaira Khan, Pakistan Gate Gorkham, reporting for Indus.
Sumaira Khan, thank you so much for updating us from the Pak-Afghan border. Now moving on, the United States and over 60 other countries have called for a safe departure of Afghan and international citizens from Afghanistan. In a joint statement, they said those in power in the country must bear responsibility for the protection of human lives and the immediate restoration of civil order. Just after the Taliban's takeover of the Afghan capital, reactions started pouring in. Former U.S. president has called on his follower Joe Biden to resign over the Taliban's takeover of Afghanistan. Protesters angry at the U.S. decision to withdraw from Kabul marched into Lafayette Square opposite the White House. Meanwhile, the Russian Foreign Ministry says that the Taliban's seizure of Afghanistan stems from the U.S.'s failure. Presidential Representative Zamir Kabulov said Moscow will not make any hasty decisions concerning recognition of the new Afghan government. Earlier, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres called on all parties to exercise the utmost restraint. Guterres will address the Security Council today during an emergency session on the situation in Afghanistan. For more on this, we are joined by Mr. Arshad Yousafzai, a political analyst speaking to us from Peshawar. Mr. Yousafzai, thank you so much for your time. Now, the Taliban's rapid takeover of Afghanistan uprooted the United States government's assessment, which had said that it would take 90 days for the group to take over Kabul. The pace of their advance surprised many observers, but some believe that it was inevitable. What's your take on this?
I think it has even surprised some of the Taliban leaders, because in their estimations, they had expected 60 days or 2 months to take over the whole country. But we have seen that they did it in less than 10 days. And apart from their military strength or will to fight in the country, I believe we also have to give credit to one of their senior leaders, Mullah Amir Khan Muttaqi, who had been working for many months on trying to convince the opponents in the government and also in the Afghan army and military commanders who could have fought the Taliban. So I think the surprise has many hard-working people behind it.
All right. Now, Mr. Yousafzai, now after the Taliban's takeover, what future do you see of Afghanistan's political factions and local militias?
Well, I don't think that they can survive Taliban now. They have been disbanded. Their leadership is hiding in other countries outside Afghanistan. Those who are staying in Afghanistan have to patch up with the Taliban. Although the Taliban have pardoned everybody, they would not allow anyone to regroup or try to take up arms against Taliban. And in that case, the Taliban will not be merciful to them anymore.
All right. Now, the Afghan citizens are rushing into the Kabul airport to flee the besieged capital. Are their lives in danger despite the Taliban's announcement for amnesty for all?
I think the fear remains there because it's uncertainty at the moment. People don't know what is going to happen to them. There are some unconfirmed reports that people have been dragged out of their houses, although the Taliban are clearly saying that in any such instances, they should be contacted. They have given their phone numbers for emergency contacts. The people worry that they would be targeted because Taliban are there. The leadership might be sincere and they are giving clear instructions, but it's always possible that the ground or the foot soldier cannot be controlled completely. So people are worried, yes.
All right. So, Mr. Yousafzai, would the international powers accept the Taliban's government, or would they impose sanctions on Afghanistan?
I think they have to accept the Taliban, given that the Taliban have promised a lot more changes than in their past. And if they were to keep up with the changes or with their promises, and if they proceed accordingly, as they have promised, if they allow girls' education, if they provide health facilities equally to all around the people, if they do not take the basic human rights of the people, there should be no way for international community to disband or to abandon Taliban. And the country needs international support. Taliban are in power now. If they are willing to be peaceful enough, if they provide basic human rights to people, why shouldn't the international community help them?
All right. Mr. Arshad Yousafzai, thank you so much for speaking to Indus News. Pakistan has called on the international community to support reconstruction of Afghanistan. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said this during a meeting with a high-level delegation from Afghanistan in Islamabad. Qureshi said Islamabad believes that a negotiated political settlement is the only way forward. He added that Pakistan wants peaceful transition in Afghanistan. The foreign minister said that he hopes the Afghan leadership will decide the future course with utmost sensibility. He added that there is a clear international convergence in support of peace and reconciliation process. Later at a press conference, Qureshi said immediate steps are required for the restoration of normalcy in Afghanistan. We're now joined by Manahil Ahmed, our correspondent, speaking to us from Islamabad. Now, Manahil, a high-level Afghan delegation is in Islamabad. Who this delegation represents and what is the purpose of their visit?
The delegation that arrived in Islamabad yesterday from Afghanistan basically consists of political leaders who are part of different governments in Afghanistan after the Taliban were toppled in 2001. The delegation consists of many political leaders such as the Speaker of the Ulaisi Jirga, Mir Rahman Rahmani, Ahmed Zia Masood, Ahmed Wali Masood, and many other senior leaders who basically represent the multi-ethnic nature of Afghanistan. The leaders over here are basically here to apprise Pakistan on the issue and highlight the issues that are the developments that are happening in Afghanistan, and to highlight that how an inclusive political settlement is extremely important in Pakistan that will represent every ethnic group in Afghanistan. Pakistan has reaffirmed its commitment to facilitate Afghanistan in every way it can to provide an inclusive Afghan-led, Afghan-owned settlement in Afghanistan, which will be peaceful without any blood spilled. The delegation has appreciated Pakistan's efforts to facilitate the delegation in Islamabad. They've also asked Pakistan to forge stronger relationship between Afghanistan and Pakistan in diverse areas, which will be more long-lasting.
Manahil, can you tell us the further engagements of this delegation in Pakistan?
The delegation arrived in Islamabad yesterday, and they were received by Pakistan's special representative on Afghanistan, Ambassador Mohammad Sadiq. Since then they arrived at the Foreign Ministry in Islamabad, where they met with Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi, where the two discussed areas of mutual interest, the developments in Afghanistan, and requested Pakistan to facilitate a peaceful negotiation in Afghanistan as much as it can, to which Pakistan has reaffirmed its commitment. The Pakistan's Prime Minister is expected to hold a National Security Council meeting, after which further instructions will be given to the government of how to facilitate the Afghan situation any further. But so far, Pakistan's Interior Ministry has opened a facilitation center for giving visas to those who are stuck in Afghanistan. It is providing facilitation to media personnel, people living in Afghanistan, diplomats, international community members, and everyone to facilitate safe evacuation from Afghanistan.
Manahil Ahmed, thank you so much for updating us. Now moving on, Malaysia's embattled Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin has resigned but announced to continue as the interim premier. Malaysia's royal palace said that the king received Muhyiddin's resignation and the entire cabinet effective immediately. Muhyiddin said that he quit after losing the confidence of the parliament. His government had been precarious ever since he was sworn in almost 18 months ago. The resignation follows months of political instability that led to the loss of his majority in the parliament. King Al Sultan Abdullah ruled out holding elections in the COVID-19 pandemic. However, there is no candidate with the parliamentary numbers to take over. It's now time for a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Israeli forces have killed 4 young Palestinians as they raided the Jenin refugee camp in northern West Bank. Palestinian media quoted health officials as saying that another person was wounded as Israeli soldiers raided Jenin city. Meanwhile, in East Jerusalem, another Palestinian was forced to demolish his own house in the Khilatin An area of the town of At-Tur. In Hebron, Israeli colonizers installed an outpost and expanded another in Kherbat Zanuta Palestinian village, south of Hebron. Palestinians in Hebron are also protesting against the Israeli army protected contractors started construction in Ibrahimi Mosque. Palestinians see the construction at the UNESCO heritage site as a way to take over the entire site for Jewish visitors. In Haiti, the death toll from a powerful quake that struck the country on Saturday has risen to nearly 1,300, with over 5,700 injured. Authorities are struggling to bring doctors to the worst-hit areas before a major storm hits. Doctors had to treat injured patients outdoors as healthcare centers have run out of space. The Civil Protection Agency says around 14,000 houses were destroyed in the natural disaster, suggesting the toll could rise further. The 7.2 magnitude earthquake has rekindled painful memories of the devastating 2010 tremor that killed an estimated 300,000 people. India has reported 417 deaths from COVID-19 and nearly 33,000 infections overnight. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 4.3 million lives and infected over 207 million people so far. More in this report. With the resurgence of coronavirus driven by the Indian Delta variant, the end to the COVID-19 pandemic has gone even farther from sight. The United States accounts for more than 1/5 of the total COVID-19 cases for the first time since mid-February. The director of the National Institutes of Health said that the United States could soon see more than 200,000 new cases of COVID-19 every day. Meanwhile, the situation in southern states gets bleaker by the day. The state of Mississippi is struggling with vaccine hesitancy and low vaccination rates among the residents despite soaring infections.
7 or 8 months ago, we had people lined up at our front door waiting to get vaccinated. In fact, I was really climbing on the State Department of Health because we couldn't get enough vaccines.
Meanwhile, Serbia has authorized a third dose of vaccines for immunocompromised. health workers, and people vaccinated at least 6 months ago. In Australia, the biggest city of Sydney recorded its deadliest day, while residents in Melbourne face a further 2 weeks of lockdown. Hundreds of unarmed defense personnel joined thousands of extra police to set up roadblocks and enforce lockdown rules in parts of Sydney.
It's a horrible situation. We need to turn that around. But can I make this point? To suggest that we're going to have zero the whole way through until the pandemic ends across the world is, I don't think, a realistic proposition. Even the Doherty report talks about strong suppression.
Japan is reportedly set to extend its state of emergency lockdown in regions including Tokyo to the middle of September. Meanwhile, Indonesian President Joko Widodo said that the country must strike a balance between health and economic interest amid a surge in COVID-19 cases. Pakistan has reported 72 deaths from coronavirus and over 3,600 cases overnight. The health ministry says that the fatalities toll has risen to 24,478. It said the country's caseload has surpassed 1.1 million. Meanwhile, more than 989,000 people have recovered so far. The health authorities said the positivity rate of infections stayed at 6.8%. There are more than 88,000 active cases, including over 4,700 in critical condition. The ministry says Pakistan has administered more than 42.6 million doses of vaccines to date. Lebanon's group Hezbollah says that it will begin importing gasoline and diesel from Iran. In a speech, Hassan Nasrallah said that the Lebanese government is no longer able to facilitate the people. Lebanon is experiencing a severe fuel shortage that has caused long lines at the petrol stations and extended blackouts. Hospitals, bakeries, and other essential facilities have said that dwindling stocks will cause them to shut down. Yesterday, a fuel tank exploded in northern Lebanon, killing at least 28 people and injuring 79. Meanwhile, security forces fired tear gas at protesters gathered outside the Beirut home of Prime Minister-designate Najib Mikati. South Korea and the United States have kicked off their annual joint military training despite North Korea's warnings of a diplomatic and security crisis. Seoul's military says the 9-day drills staged on the peninsula are based largely on computer stimulation and no-field training. It said that the exercise is in defense nature. The number of participating troops will be restricted amid the ongoing COVID-19 situation. Meanwhile, Pyongyang has accused the two sides of pressing ahead with the war games despite its efforts for dialogue and peace. It warned of serious consequences, again halting its daily hotline communication with Seoul. The Human Rights Watch is calling for a United Nations probe into Bangladesh's enforced disappearances. In a report, the watchdog said that 86 members of the opposition Nationalist Party went missing in the past decade. The watchdog called for targeted sanctions on the country's elite police squad, Rapid Action Battalion, accused of the crime. The report said that the disappearances have become a hallmark of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's rule to curtail free speech. In a statement, the HRW specialist Meenakshi Ganguly said that the Bangladeshi authorities provide impunity for these kinds of abuses. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has called an early election for the 20th of September. The announcement comes as polls indicate his minority Liberal government looks within reach of forming a majority. The Prime Minister met the Governor-General, who accepted his formal request to dissolve the Parliament. Talking to reporters, Trudeau said Canadians need to choose how we finish the fight against COVID-19. He said he needed a new mandate to ensure voters' approval for his government's plan to recover from the pandemic.
As Canadians know, this is a moment where we're going to be taking decisions that will last not just for the coming months, but for the coming decades. And Canadians deserve their say. That's exactly what we're going to give them.
The newly released data shows 71% of eligible Canadians are fully vaccinated amid the fourth wave of the pandemic. Now moving on, in Zambia, opposition leader Hakainde Hichilema has won the presidential election after defeating incumbent Edgar Lungu. Hichilema secured nearly 3 million votes out of a total of 7 million registered voters, while Lungu came in second. The massive win means Hichilema does not have to contest any runoffs amid meeting the constitutional 50.1% threshold. Meanwhile, the losing candidate Lungu says that the poll was not free and fair, alleging rivals of committing violence. Elishima, an economist, is the 7th elected president of Zambia since its independence in 1964. He would face a daunting task of turning around the economic fortunes of one of the world's poorest countries. Sudan says it will press ahead with the efforts to ensure security, stability, and unity in Ethiopia. In a press briefing, Sudanese Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok said Khartoum reached out to all sides as part of a push to end the conflict in Tigray. Hamdok made the pledge as Ethiopia grapples with grinding conflict in northern Tigray region. Last week, Sudan recalled its envoy to Ethiopia after Addis Ababa rejected a mediation effort by Khartoum. Tens of thousands of Ethiopians have fled to Sudan to escape the Tigray conflict. The United Nations says the swelling conflict in the country has already pushed 400,000 people into famine-like conditions. In Peru, thousands of people took to the streets of the capital, Lima, against the government of the newly elected President Pedro Castillo. They marched outside the Joint Command headquarters with banners, megaphones, and horns. They demanded the resignation of Castillo and Prime Minister Guaido Bellido, who is under investigation for allegedly supporting terrorism. Castillo, backed by a Marxist party, won the election by a razor-thin margin against conservative Keiko Fujimori. His victory has shaken the political elite and worried companies, fearful of his plans to hike taxes on mining. A massive wildfire outside of Jerusalem sent a thick cloud of smoke over the city as authorities struggled to contain the blaze. A cloud stretched over much of the city, covering the skies overhead with a black and orange blanket of smoke. Several small outlying communities have been forced to evacuate. Hundreds of firefighters are battling the blaze, while hot, dry weather and heavy winds complicates the efforts. In Venezuela, an Olympic medal winner cyclist amazed the public with his incredible stunts in a neighborhood recently run by violent gangs. Details on this report. Spectators cheered with applause and laughter as Venezuelan Olympic medalist Daniel Diaz flied with his bike in the previous troubled neighborhood of Coda 905. The cyclist showed his stunts in a makeshift track that was placed in the street in a bid to present positive image of his region. Many recorded the tricks while others took pictures with him.
It is exciting to be able to share with people at Coda 905 finally. We had planned it months ago, but it was not possible. We are very excited because we bring joy to the community.
The 36-year-old Diaz, a living legend of BMX freestyle, won the silver medal for Venezuela in the new freestyle event at the Tokyo Olympics. He dreams of competing at the Paris 2024 Olympics as well.
We are thrilled to have here those athletes who represented us at the Olympics. The children are thrilled after everything that we have been through, the violence of armed groups.
Almost a month ago, there were clashes in the area of Caracas between police and criminal gangs that left at least 26 people dead. Fighting went on for more than 2 days until a deployment of 2,500 troops occupied the conflict zone. In Indonesia, a group of volunteers helps pets left behind when their owners tested positive for COVID-19 and are hospitalized or placed in isolation. A rights group, Animal Defender, has launched the Project AD19 program for this purpose. More in this report. The pets picked up by Animal Defender usually get a checkup before going to an existing animal shelter. The AD19 program has in the past month added 40 dogs and 4 cats to more than 160 guests already at the shelter. Founder Donnie Haradu Tana has been selling homemade food and clothes for cats and dogs to raise cash for the care of unsupervised pets. The pet shelter costs about $8,341 to run each month, and no donations or payments are accepted from owners.
Bentuk-bentuk pertolongannya kita sesuaikan.
We adjust the form of assistance according to the needs of the pet owners, either to evacuate and take care of it completely, or we take care of it temporarily, like Gladys, or we help to feed the animals, clean the cage or bath the dogs. We will do everything according to the owner's request.
Meanwhile, concerns about virus transmission from animals to humans also complicated the situation and many pets were abandoned. However, veterinarian Magda Rumawas said people should not be worried and COVID-19 patients in self-isolation can keep the pets by their side to ease the anxiety.
A lot of people who tested positive for COVID-19 asked me what should they do with their dogs. It would be good if the dogs are there to accompany the owners during the self-isolation period because they can keep people entertained and they can help to reduce stress, which is good. But do not hug or kiss dogs because it can transfer the droplets of coronavirus.
Tana said that many owners had passed away and their pets are abandoned now. Meanwhile, the country is battling the worst epidemic in Asia with more than 3.7 million confirmed cases and over 100,000 deaths. China's value-added industrial output has risen to 6.4% year-on-year in July. The National Bureau of Statistics attributes the surge to continuing recovery of production demand. However, it missed the analyst's forecast of 7.8% after spiking over 8% in June. According to NBS data, China's retail sales also grew by 8.5% in July from a year earlier. Meanwhile, fixed asset investment rose over 10% in the first 7 months of the year from the same period last year. China's economy rebounded to its pre-pandemic growth levels, driven by surprisingly strong exports. European stocks are trading lower, tracking Asian markets as investors react to weaker than anticipated economic data and closely monitor geopolitical concerns. The Pan-European Stock 600 index fell around 0.5%, easing from a record level scaled last week. United Kingdom's FTSE 100 and France's CAC 40 index both edged lower by almost 1%. Germany's DAX index also shed almost 0.5%. Meanwhile, Lufthansa fell 2.9% after the German finance agency unveiled plans to sell up a quarter of its 20% stake in the airline. It's now time to take a look at the weather updates from around the world. For the latest news updates, you can follow us on our social media at indus.news.